Hello friends and fellow bibliophiles, welcome back to Cat's Novel Adventures. It's time for me to share everything I read in June with you. I participated in 3 month-long readathons: Joy Reading June, The Unhinged Bunch, which also had a watchathon component to it, as well as June on the Range. I'm also participating in 2 summer-long readathons, Big Book Summer as well as Summer Book Bingo, and I participated in 2 book clubs, the Cozy Cottage Book Club as well as FOMO. As far as my reading stats, I read 10 books in the month of June. One of them was a reread, another was a nonfiction. I also had a story collection as well as 3 picture books. And for my ratings, I had 6 5-stars, 3 4-stars, as well as 1 3-star. So I really do think I had a great reading month. I pretty much loved everything that I read. One of the reading adventures I was looking most forward to participating in throughout the month of June was Joy Reading June, which is a month-long readathon devoted to mood reading. And I am a mood reader by nature, and I had been really wanting to do more mood reading along with the readathons that I was participating in. And this wonderful readathon was created and hosted by Alice at Alice in the Giant Bookshelf. As many of you know, Alice passed away in June. I was really shocked and saddened to receive that news because Alice was a lovely person. I enjoyed engaging with her in comments on her videos. I loved attending the FOMO book club meetings with her and Gemma and Jack. That trio of friends, they're just a wonderful group of ladies, very welcoming. And they were all booktubers that I had met early on when I first started my booktube channel. So it was just really nice to get to know them and participate in their book club meetings because they really picked out some really fantastic books. So I'm not really 100% sure what's going on with the FOMO book club at this point. Gemma and Jack do need some time to process Alice's passing. They were very good friends. And even if they don't decide to continue with the FOMO book club, I have decided that I'm going to read the last 2 books for this year. I just want to do it as a way of remembrance of Alice. I really am so grateful to Alice for creating Joy Reading June because reading is supposed to be joyful. And even though she is no longer here with us, when I think about the joy of reading, I'm going to think about Alice. Also, I know that she's not physically with us any longer, but I am grateful for the fact that her booktube channel is still up and we can visit it at any time. There are many videos that I want to watch that I have not had the opportunity to watch yet. And there are some videos that I want to rewatch because Alice was wonderful about making some terrific recommendations. She read some authors that I really enjoy reading, and I'm looking forward to being able to go back and visit her, whenever I want to spend some time with her. So that brings me great comfort. Therefore, everything that I read in the month of June counts for Joy Reading June. And going forward, when June rolls around, I will be reading for the joy of it. In fact, I think I'm going to be reading many months throughout the year for the joy of it, and I'm grateful to Alice for that. Before I share my thoughts on the books that I read in June, I want to mention my participation in the Unhinged Bunch readathon. This was a month-long Patreon readathon watchathon hosted by 3 booktubers, my bestie Kelsi at Slime and Slashers, Andrew at It Came From the Page, and Kitty at Spicy Cats Reads. While I know a couple of the books that I read in June probably would have counted for some of the prompts, I really concentrated more on the watchathon component of this watching event, and I attended 4 watch parties and watched 4 horror movies from back in the 80s. So the first one we watched was Alligator from 1980, then Neon Maniacs, which was a 1986 movie. We also watched Silent Madness from 1984 and Pieces from 1982. Of the four movies, Alligator was probably my favorite, and Pieces came in as second place. I love attending watch parties. It's fun to attend these with friends and get in the chat about all the ridiculousness that happens in some of these cheesy 80 horror movies. Now let's talk about the books. I only read one book for June on the Range, which is a month-long readathon created and hosted by Michael K. Vaughan and a slew of other wonderful booktubers. And that book was The Shadow Rider by William Colt MacDonald. This follows Dale Stevens, who is known as the Gila Shadow, who has recently robbed a bank and has crossed the border into Mexico to escape the law. While he is fueling up on some victuals at the Golden Cactus, he meets Pascal Santiago, a wealthy Mexican official who is having some troubles of his own. Together, they come up with a plan to make an escape, and they get some help from two cowpunches, Rug and Lamp, hilarious names, if I must say so myself. And they get out of Dodge. They make it safely back across the border to Santiago's home, which is in the United States. Santiago is so grateful for Dale's help that he offers him an opportunity at redemption if he will help him with a problem, and that is the cold-blooded killer El Gato Montes, who Santiago has some bad blood with, and he really wants to take some revenge on this guy. Well, Montes is not liked by many of the people in Mexico, so Dale would be doing a great service for everybody involved. Despite being an outlaw, I really like Dale Stevens. I consider him a Western Robin Hood. I love that Dale gets a second chance and even a chance at love. Yes, there is some romance on the range. I really enjoyed the storyline, enjoyed the characters. I also loved all the Western slang, lingo, and phrases. This story is fast-paced with lots of action and plenty of humor. I am so happy that I ended up reading this for June on the Range. It's a short little book, but I had a great time reading it. It's only my second, Gunsmoke Western that I've ever read, but I plan on reading some more. I picked up quite a few of these little books at the Friends of the Library store, so I will be reading some more in the future, and I ended up giving The Shadow Rider 4 stars. My next book is the crime thriller Billy Summers by Stephen King. This happens to be one of my 24 books for 2024. It follows Billy Summers, who is an exceptional hitman who is trying to quit the business. He is offered, however, one last job, and he's very intrigued by this job because it will earn him a whole lot of money and make him very comfortable in his retirement. However, he is a little hesitant also about the job because it's quite different from anything he has ever done before. He has to assimilate in a small town and play the part of a writer, and he has to wait patiently for an undetermined amount of time until he can make the hit. This is an amazing story. I got sucked into it from the very beginning. It's everything you want in a Stephen King novel. Fantastic writing, complex characters, a small town setting. Oh, and the story is really, really great. It is a story within a story. Because Billy is playing the part of a writer, we learn his backstory through a novel that he is writing, so it unfolds organically. Then there is also another storyline that appears about midway through the book, and that one just adds something special to the story as well. It gives Billy a chance at redemption. I thought this was a terrific thriller. It has plenty of heart. In fact, I cried in it, I admit it. It's not the first time that Stephen King has made me cry, I can guarantee you that. And there is some humor also mixed in. I loved it very much, and I ended up giving Billy Summers 5 stars. My next book is a classic psychological thriller written by Patricia Highsmith, and that is Strangers on a Train. I read this for the FOMO Book Club. It was their May-June selection. It follows 2 men who are strangers on a train, but not for very long. We have Guy Haynes, who is a successful architect, and Charles Bruno, a depressed alcoholic. They meet by chance and strike up a conversation, and some personal information is revealed to each other. We learn that Guy is seeking a divorce from his estranged wife, Miriam, and that Bruno really hates his father. They agree that they would both be better off if they didn't have these people in their lives. Well, Bruno shares a plan he has that he'll kill Miriam if Guy will kill his father. And he thinks that this would be the perfect plan because no one would suspect either of them for murder because they're strangers. They have no connection to one another. Well, Guy doesn't like the plan. He's pretty straight-laced and he doesn't believe in murder. And also, Bruno is very drunk, so he doesn't take him seriously. He gets off the train at his stop and goes about his life and forgets about Bruno. Unfortunately, Bruno kills Miriam, and then he expects Guy to play his part. I really did think that this was an interesting premise. It's a dark examination of human nature. It also shows you the power of guilt, as well as what happens when one person manipulates another person. But with all that being said, I thought it was a bit too long. It was a little bit drawn out, and I found myself getting bored in some parts of it. Also, I was not invested in either one of these characters. Charles Bruno is a loathsome, and he kind of gives me the creeps. And Guy is kind of weak-minded and indifferent. I just really didn't care for either one of them. And I just think that Guy made some really dumb mistakes that he could have solved a lot of these problems. But I will say that I think that Patricia Highsmith effectively demonstrates that if under the right circumstances, anyone could be capable of murder. So I ended up giving Strangers on a Train 3 stars. It was my first Patricia Highsmith novel. I think that I would possibly pick something else up by her. And like I said, for the most part, I enjoyed the story, but I don't know. I may check out the movie. It was directed by Alfred Hitchcock and see if I might like the movie version better than the book. The one nonfiction book that I read in June is Write, Eat, Sleep, Repeat, 30 Days, 50,000 Words, How to Win NaNoWriMo by Emma Bennett. I read this book in preparation for Camp NaNoWriMo in July, and it's also one of my 24 books for 2024. This is a practical guide with tried and true tips on how to win NaNoWriMo. NaNoWriMo happens to be a writing challenge where writers try to complete a 50,000 word manuscript in 30 days. And it's also very useful for participating in Camp NaNoWriMo, which is more laid back. It contains sections on preparation, motivation, application, as well as inspiration and insights from winners of NaNoWriMo, including Emma's experience, which resulted in this little book. I enjoyed the format of the book. It's easily digestible. I found several helpful tips, and I appreciated the resource section. Of course, I love Emma's sense of humor, her positivity, as well as her enthusiasm for writing. I think that this is a good resource for beginner writers who want to establish a writing routine, as well as for seasoned writers who want to give NaNoWriMo a try. This was a 4-star read for me. My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones was my reread for June. I originally read this back in June of 2023 for a slasher readathon. I did a vlog with all of my thoughts on this book, so if you want to hear that full review, of this book. I will leave a link in the description box below for you to check out. This is a terrific story. It is an homage to slasher films. I adore the main character of the book. It's Jay Daniels. She is wonderfully flawed. However, she's very likable, she's smart, and she is tough. And this time around, I decided to listen to the book on audio, and I think that really did help me out with some of the issues I had with the book when I read it last June. I ended up giving it 4 stars because I felt that it was a little bit long at points. Some of the writing was a bit confusing, and the ending, I don't know, I was a little bit confused with the ending as well, especially with 2 of the characters, the sheriff and Theo Mondragon. Well, I don't know if it's because I did listen to it on audiobook and I also knew the premise of the book, but this time around, it did not seem long. I guess it was just the wonderful narration perhaps, but the writing didn't seem as confusing. The situations with the sheriff and Theo Mondragon were cleared up for me. My enjoyment ended up raising it to a 5-star read for me, and it got me excited to read Don't Fear the Reaper. So let's talk about Don't Fear the Reaper by Stephen Graham Jones. This is the sequel to My Heart is a Chainsaw. It's the 2nd book in the Indian Lake trilogy. It also happens to be one of my 24 books for 2024. It is set 4 years after the Independence Day massacre. Jade is back in town. Those 4 years, she had time to reflect and put the traumatic event behind her, and also to release the obsession she had with slasher films as well as with Final Girls. But Jay Daniels is not the only person that's rolling into Proof Rock right before Christmas. Dartmill South, he is a dangerous convicted serial killer who takes advantage of a blizzard to escape a convoy transfer and ends up in Proof Rock, where he unleashes a fury upon the town. I thought this book was absolutely amazing. I loved it. Dartmill South is terrifying. He shows no mercy. The kills are horrifying. There is a scene with an eyeball, blah, 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 blah. It made me squeamish when I read it. I'm kind of feeling that way again. It's giving me the heebie-jeebies just kind of thinking about it. So I'm not going to think about it anymore. I find that this book is fast-paced, it's raw, the characters have depth, so much slasher goodness. I ended up giving it 5 stars. The Cozy Cottage Book Club's June selection was A Stage Full of Shakespeare Stories. This was written by Angela McAllister and illustrated by Alice Lindstrom. This is an anthology of 12 stories from William Shakespeare, retold for children. There are 6 comedies and 6 tragedies. Each tale begins with a quote by Shakespeare, a title page wonderfully illustrated, and a pictorial glossary of characters. Each story is complemented by vivid illustrations created in collage. After all of the stories, there is a brief biography of William Shakespeare, a complete list of all of his plays, and a short overview of the stories with some added information. I really enjoyed this delightful collection. The stories that are included are Macbeth, Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, A Midsummer Night's Dream, The Tempest, Twelfth Night, Othello, As You Like It, Julius Caesar, Much Ado About Nothing, King Lear, and The Merchant of Venice. I loved all the stories, but I really think my favorites are A Midsummer Night's Dream and Much Ado About Nothing. I ended up giving A Stage Full of Shakespeare Stories 4 stars. In June, I read 3 picture books, and the reason I did that is, as most of you know, my mom has dementia, and even though she can read words and she can read sentences, we're not really quite sure how much she can comprehend because she's not really able to articulate exactly what she thinks is going on. So I thought maybe if we read some picture books together, that she would enjoy it. It would give her some kind of enrichment, and it worked. She really did have a great time with the stories that I chose. Two of them are picture books that are written and illustrated by Keiko Kaza. I've had these books on my shelf for a very long time. I had bought these for my oldest son, Barry, who is now 35. So they've been in our household for quite a bit on our bookshelf. So I was glad I was able to pull them out again and read them with my mom. And the first one is A Mother for Choco. And this book is absolutely delightful. Choco is a lonely little bird who goes on a journey to find a mother. He meets various animal moms along the way that share one physical characteristic, but no one quite looks exactly like him. And then he spots Mrs. Bear picking apples and bursts out crying. Mrs. Bear quickly runs over to him and picks him up and consoles him. And it doesn't take Choco very long to realize that Mrs. Bear has all of the qualities of a mom that he's looking for, but he's sad that she doesn't look anything like him. But then Mrs. Bear surprises him with an invitation that changes everything for Choco. I love found family stories, and this one is sweet and engaging. It has brightly colored illustrations. The messages are about acceptance, non-traditional families, and adoption. I think it would make a great mentor text in the classroom to teach sequencing, compare and contrast, as well as problem and solutions. This is a 5-star read for me. The second book by Keiko Kaza is The Wolf's Chicken Stew. This is about a wolf who loves to eat and loves to think about eating. One day he gets a craving for chicken stew, so he goes out to find himself a chicken. He spots one but hesitates because he decides that he is going to fatten her up with baking her all kinds of sweet treats. Well, little does he realize that the decision that he makes will have an unexpected outcome. This is another delightful story. It has good-hearted humor and precious illustrations. I love the wolf's persistence, even though ultimately he wants to eat the chicken. And I have to believe that the chicken kind of knows what's going on, but she chooses to go along with it. She's not being judgmental. She doesn't think of him as a big bad wolf. It has all kinds of other messages of acceptance and empathy and making good choices. I do think it would make a great mentor text for teaching cause and effect, also making predictions, as well as writing about animals or food. And in fact, I think it would be great for teaching math concepts, like the concept of 100. It would be perfect to use with 100-day activities. They do that a lot of times in the lower grades, and I remember doing those with my kids, and this would have been a perfect book to read to them to celebrate 100 days in school. So yeah, it's another 5-star read for me. Last but certainly not least is a playful and beautifully illustrated picture book called Animalia, written and illustrated by Graham Bass. Graham Bass is another favorite of mine, right up there with Chris Van Allsburg. This book is visually stunning, and it begins with a short poem that I would like to share with you. Within the pages of this book, you may discover, if you look, beyond the spell of written words, a hidden land of beasts and birds. For many things are of a kind, and those with keenest eyes will find 1,000 things, or maybe more. It's up to you to keep the score. A final word before we go. There's one more thing you ought to know. In Animalia, you see, it's possible you might find me. And he signs it Graham. And what that means is throughout the pages of the book, Graham Bass is encouraging readers to look for him as a child. In fact, he is even on the cover. I don't know if you can see him right here. So how fun is that? I adore alliteration, and every letter in this amazing alphabet book exudes alliteration in an elaborate sentence featuring a variety of animals that are engaged in amusing activities. There's also rich vocabulary, not only in the sentence, but also throughout the illustrations. For example, diabolical dragons, daintily devouring delicious delicacies. Each letter's illustration is jam-packed with not only awesome animals, but also objects beginning with that letter. There are lots of references to the arts, history, literature, music, and science. My mom and I spent a good amount of time trying to identify and find the animals and the objects beginning with each of the letters. We had such a delightful time. I can only imagine the amount of time that Graham Base had to spend not only illustrating and writing this book, but also all of the research that went into identifying the animals and the objects. I also think that Animalia could be a terrific teaching tool. In addition to being a fantastic alphabet book, you could use it as a visual scavenger hunt. You could use it to explore vocabulary. There's opportunities for writing and researching. It would be great for teaching animals and alliteration. And I also think you could use it for arts and crafts inspired by the artwork as well as the content. In fact, I found a fantastic resource by Jane Welsh. I'll put a link in the description box below with activities for every letter of the alphabet. I absolutely love this book. It brings me so much joy, and it definitely earns all 5 stars. Now let me share how I'm doing with Big Book Summer and Summer Book Bingo. Big Book Summer is hosted by Sue at Sue Jackson, and the whole point of this readathon is to read books that are 400 or more pages. And so far in June, I read 2. And that is Billy Summers, which was 514 pages, and Don't Fear the Reaper, which was 450 pages. Summer Book Bingo is hosted by Tiffany at Beautiful Minutia. She has a bingo board with all kinds of wonderful prompts on it. The goal is to try to read a book for each prompt and get as many bingos as you can before the end of the summer. So I have read some books that qualify for some of these prompts, so let me share those with you. For book in a series, I read Don't Fear the Reaper. Over 500 pages, I counted Billy Summers. I got the free space. Short story was A Stage Full of Shakespeare. For the vacation travel prompt, I read Strangers on a Train. For reread, it was My Heart is a Chainsaw. And for new to you author, I counted The Shadow Rider. So I have 6 books plus the free space, no bingo, but lots of book joy. Well, friends, that's a wrap on everything I read in June. I think it was a pretty good reading month. It was a joyful reading month, thanks to Alice and her readathon, Joy Reading June. What about you? Have you read any of the books that I shared with you today? Did you discover any new favorites among the books you read in June? Let me know in the comments below. As always, thanks for stopping by. I really appreciate you watching. And until our paths cross again, stay amazing and be adventurous.